morning. I'm Pastor Michael Jarrell here. I wish I was actually here with you. Unfortunately, I am under the weather this morning, and rather than come and bring that to you, I decided that it might be best to just stay home. So, I did want to continue, though, in our sermon series and share with you those things that I have studied, those things that I've looked into this past week regarding our mystical Christmas series, particularly this idea of why Virgin. So I hope that you will come with me on this little journey that we're going to take here via video and look into this idea of why God would have chosen a virgin as a means of Jesus coming to this earth, and what that means for us and for the things that we believe. One of the great powers that human beings have is the power to question, to ask things like, what if? Or how did that happen? Or why is that like it is? It's a power that's driven the foundations of culture and civilization from the time the first people began to coalesce and band together against the elements of the primitive world. That power, I believe, is born of something we call wonder. That's a form of questioning that seeks to find an answer to the great mysteries of the natural and supernatural world. This wonder has been the catalyst for some of the greatest achievements in science and culture that mankind has ever accomplished. The building of great cities and civilizations, discoveries in math and science that have produced medicine, technology, and advances in our understanding of individual and community behavior. All of these have been introduced into modern life because somebody wondered about it, and they responded to that wonder. Albert Einstein recognized that this also played a role in our understanding of religion and faith. And he said, the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It's the source of all true art and science. He to whom the emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. His eyes are closed. The insight into the mystery of life, coupled, though it be with fear, has also given rise to religion. To know what is impenetrable to us really exists, manifesting itself as the highest wisdom and the most radiant beauty, which our dull faculties can comprehend only in their most primitive forms. This knowledge, this feeling, is at the center of true religiousness. I believe this knowledge and feeling that Einstein refers to is the tremendous mystery that we as seekers of God have chosen to engage through the lens of Jesus. We've wondered in our own small way about the world beyond the visible world. We've glimpsed, as Paul said, through the glass darkly, and found that we wanted more than a glimpse. We want to seek the mystery on the other side of the glass, to see as God, as Moses sought to see, though we too have trouble taking in the holiness when exposed to it. We seek to find meaning from the mundane in the mystery of life as God has made it in creation. We seek to answer the questions that wonder offers to us in the hope that this will lead us to a greater understanding of God. Now, this morning, that wonder is going to be focused on the idea of the virgin birth. And for many people, the virgin birth, like the rest of biblical literature, is an either-or proposition. Either it is absolutely 100% true, or it's a lie and it's not worth the paper it's printed on. Albert Mohler, the president of the Southern Baptist Seminary, writes, if Jesus was not born of the Virgin, then the Bible cannot be trusted when it comes to telling us the story of Jesus. And that mistrust cannot be limited to how he came to us in terms of the incarnation. Now, this approach to the Bible is a somewhat recent development. It has its roots in an idea called inerrancy. That is, that the Bible is completely free of all errors, mistakes, exactly as it is written. So when many people read the Bible in our native English and it says, "Look, a virgin will become pregnant and give birth to a son. They'll call him Emmanuel," they assume that each one of those words mean exactly what they mean in English. I mean, that makes the most sense, right? But I believe the truth requires a little more of us than taking things for face value. You see, there are some people that do believe that that's exactly the way that it happened, that it was written that way, and it was certainly happened that way. And I've known many good, faithful, conscientious Christians over the years that believe exactly that. But I also want to present another possibility. Not to say that one is definitively right over the other. I think those are questions to be answered in eternity, as I heard one person say. But I want to give you another perspective, another way of looking at it. You see, the words that are written there, translated into English for us, came from Hebrew. That was the language of Isaiah 7. And then into Greek, which is the original manuscript of Matthew, and finally into Elizabethan English for the King James, and then making their way into a more modern vernacular with current versions like the Revised Standard, the American Standard, and then eventually into the Common English that we read this morning. This transition, these shifts from one language to another, from one vernacular to another, have the capacity for the meaning of words to get jumbled up, sometimes even replaced in the translation process. For instance, let's look at the original verse in Matthew 1:23 and compare it to the original verse in Isaiah 7:14. Matthew 1:23 says, "Look, a virgin will become pregnant and give birth to a son. They will call him Emmanuel." Emmanuel means God with us. Isaiah 7:14 says, "Therefore the Lord will give you a sign. The young woman is pregnant and about to give birth to a son, and she will name him Emmanuel." You notice the wording from Isaiah to Matthew is considerably different. The Hebrew word describing the woman in Isaiah 7:14 is the word Alma, a word translated as young woman or maiden in other instances throughout the Old Testament. The common Hebrew word for virgin is actually a word betula, a word that's significantly different than the one used here, even when you consider the potential Hebrew root words. The word Alma that was translated into Greek when the author of Matthew rewrote the verse, which is an apparent transliteration, was the word Parthenos, meaning virgin. But it doesn't always mean virgin. This word, like many others in antiquity, also carries multiple meanings, which included a young woman of marriable age, a virgin, and even a virgin male. Now, why say all of that? Why jump through all those linguistic, literary hoops over a single word? Because when it comes to our faith, the words matter. This word, virgin, and its meaning have been a source of both comfort and consternation to millions of people for the past 2 millennia. For some, their very belief in God is buttressed or shaken to the core over whether or not Jesus was born in a form of purity reserved for holiness. If he's not, questions arise of his divine status as God in the flesh or Emmanuel. One writer said, if his birth were like any other human birth, through the union of a human father and mother, we would have to question his full divinity. But I wonder if that's true. And I wonder, when we really get into the meaning, if that matters quite so much as we think it matters. So now let's apply our definition for this word mystical that we've used to start off our series and kind of see how we might apply that to the idea of a virgin birth. The definition that I use is the experience of having a spiritual meaning or reality that's neither apparent to the senses nor obvious to the intelligence, that leads to union or direct communion with the divine. Now remember, That's the big point. How does this idea of a virgin birth connect us to God? How does this idea draw us closer, draw us into the presence of God? So, I wonder if that word virgin carries too much meaning. And perhaps it's been tainted by both our culture and the history of church doctrine. I wonder if sometimes we devote too much energy, spend too much time living and dying on these hills of conscience. Maybe the issue should not be so much about Mary being or not being a virgin, but about the idea that this type of birth signifies. I believe that the power of our faith lies in the deeper meaning behind these words more than the literal words themselves. And all too often, we fail to get at the deeper meaning in favor of a simple, literal explanation understood in our own context and not that of the biblical writer. I believe very firmly that wonder, the wonder of who God is, the wonder of how we relate to God, the wonder of what it means to engage with the divine is what drives us. But care has to be taken to see that we steer ourselves well. To force meaning into something that was never intended to have that meaning has been the bane of good theology and a bulwark to those who seek their own ends. I also believe that for many people, this doctrine of the virgin birth is a sacred expression of faith, a cherished understanding of who Jesus is and how he became a part of this world. I don't want in any way to say that you have to believe in a virgin birth to be a Christian, but by the same token, I also want to affirm that the doctrine of the incarnation understood that way isn't necessarily the only way to understand it. As a Methodist, I believe the origin of doctrine and its goal is in the practice of Christian faith. So the question becomes, as we wonder about this idea of a virgin birth, how does it relate to our practice of the faith? More importantly, in my opinion, how does this lead us to better love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves? First and foremost, I think we need to move from literalism to pragmatism when it comes to our beliefs and how we practice them. Instead of being focused on the words in a literal, factual, measurable sense, we need to see them as expressions of the divine intersecting with the real world. Or, as they used to call it in the church, the profane. We need to see behind the words to the meaning, understanding that the writers of the Gospels were writing a particular kind of literature, something called an ancient biography. And they did so to make a point. And I believe the point was this: God did something new, something different, something that changed the way that men looked at God in the person of Jesus. Her virginity was not the point. Her sexuality was not the point. The point is that through the agency of Mary and through the birth of Jesus in the power of the Spirit, something new arrived. A new way of being, a new way of living, a new world that collided with the present one. The birth of Jesus was the means of heralding that new way, that new being and living. And in that narrative, one that only occurs in 2 of the Gospels, we see the true wonder of what it is to be children and followers of God by being able to view a life that is at the same time inspiration and example. Jesus is not necessarily the fulfillment of a miraculous specific prediction, such as Isaiah 7:14, but rather he is the fulfillment of the law and the prophets in a more comprehensive sense. He is their crystallization. He is their expression in an embodied life. He decisively reveals and incarnates the passion of God as disclosed in the law and the prophets. What he is as a promise and hope that our world, our existence, our being can be very different by living as he lived, by choosing to be as he was, by striving to seek Christ-likeness and Christ's being. And that, I believe, is what is at the core of the virgin birth. Beyond the arguments over words, beyond the theological constructs and declarations of spiritual war and infighting, there's a promise from God that the world we live in is still malleable, still being created and recreated, that we, the children of God, the followers of this Rabbi, Jesus the Nazarene, can be part of that creative process to bring about the kingdom of God, a place where the love of God and love of neighbor are the true law of the land. I'd like to close our time together with this poem by Madeleine L'Engle. It's called Into the Darkest Hour. I hope it speaks to you as it did to me when I first read it. It was a time like this, war and tumult of war, a horror in the air. Hungry yawned the abyss, and yet there came the star, and the child, most wonderfully there. It was time like this, a fear of lust and power, license and greed and blight, and yet the Prince of Bliss came into the darkest hour in quiet and silent night. And in a time like this, how we celebrate his birth when things fall apart. Ah, wonderful it is, with no room on the earth, the stable is in our heart. I hope that as you've heard these words and as we have engaged in these things together and you consider these things, I hope that God speaks to you in a way that helps us to see into what is truly divine and how we, the children of God, may live into that divinity. I wonder if you would join me in this, our confessional prayer. If you'd stand, please. Please join me in our confessional prayer. Holy God, you promise to do great things for us, yet we do not trust you. You extend your mercy to us, and yet we do not trust you. You lift up the humble, you fill the hungry with good things, and yet we still do not trust you. Forgive us and help us to trust in the promises you have given us. May we find restoration and grace through Jesus Christ our Lord, who taught us to pray in this way: Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.